And it is so tough to start broadcasts that are this critical. Julian Assange, one of the most famous political prisoners in history, now released, makes a statement, his first statement. 2 wolves in MAGA hats. A warning? Oh, we're going to cover that and all the testimony he made, at least the critical parts. But back to Julian for a second and who he is, for those of you who don't know, the founder of WikiLeaks, who released information that, well, a lot of people didn't want out. Call it the industrial military complex, call it the U.S. government, call it the CIA to be more specific. It set into motion a series of events that resulted in not only Julian Assange being imprisoned, but also his informants. Releases like Collateral murder that nobody ever wanted released. So who is WikiLeaks Julian Assange and what did he do? Man, that saga has gone on for years. A journalist, not allowed to talk. His sources captured. His family, as we find out, trailed Julian Assange, saying it's never going to end. But most importantly, the critical statement in all of it, 2 wolves in MAGA hats. This is a portion of a much larger video because so much has transpired now. This will be the coverage of Assange's testimony that we're going to trickle into many moving parts. Jack Smith's indictment, the useless indictment, setting up what many will now declare another Trump impeachment once he's elected. There is so many chess pieces being moved right now. This will be just the tip of the iceberg, and I'll be back with you in 1 second, because when I start, I don't want to stop this broadcast. We'll make this fast. I need you to subscribe. If you like what we're doing here, please subscribe now. Share the video. Your comments are very necessary on this video because people stand on 2 sides of the Trump-Assange fence, and I want to hear what your opinion is. Very important. If you want to support my efforts, I don't just ask for donations. I give you something in return, and that is more news. News you can only get at restrictedrepublic.com. Put discount code independence in monthly checkout. I know times are tight right now. Get $4 a month for 2 years. Best part, you can cancel anytime. I need you there today. I promise you. The information like today's broadcast, it's going to continue on as information you can't get anywhere else because it's only at restrictedrepublic.com. Get there now, but now let's kick back in to this first public statement made by Julian Assange since his release from prison.
The transition from years of confinement in a maximum security prison to being here before the representatives of 46 nations and 700 million people is a profound and a surreal shift. The experience of isolation for years in a small cell is difficult to convey. It strips away one's sense of self, leaving only the raw essence of existence.
When you watch this entire testimony, it is evident the damage that was done to Julian Assange over years of imprisonment, captivity. He still finds strength to make it through. Before being confined in maximum security prison, before being in front of 46 nations, this group is called PACE. They are listening to his testimony to determine if he was a political prisoner. And he gives them more than they could ever have expected.
Justice, for me, is now precluded as the US government insisted in writing into its plea agreement that I cannot file a case at the European Court of Human Rights or even a Freedom of Information Act request over what it did to me as a result of its extradition request.
So Assange had to make a choice. And he says what the choice is. He says it was a choice between freedom over realizable justice. He must have felt within his 100% 175-year sentence. He would never get out unless he took the conditions. What would you choose? It's a tough decision, one I hope none of you are ever faced with, but he goes on.
I want to be totally clear. I am not free today because the system worked. I am free today after years of incarceration because I pled guilty to journalism. I pled guilty to seeking information from a source. I pled guilty to obtaining information from a source. And I pled guilty to informing the public what that information was. I did not plead guilty to anything else.
Very important statement. Him explaining to the world why he pled guilty. He doesn't want any misconceptions of what happened. Because he knows, and he states, the retaliation that may still fall upon him, the retaliation that has happened to date. He goes into further details.
I see more impunity, more secrecy, more retaliation for telling the truth, and more self-censorship. It is hard not to draw a line from the US government's prosecution of me, its crossing the Rubicon by internationally criminalism, to the chilled climate for freedom of expression that exists now.
The criminalization of freedom of expression. How often have we talked about that here? It is ongoing and continual. Julian Assange is simply pleading to those that will listen to what happened and what the damage can be moving forward. He states, and I believe inaccurately, one inaccurate statement is that you are only allowed the freedom of speech in the United States. Julian's been away for a long time, and he doesn't realize that here it is under attack every day. He goes on further to the publishing of Collateral murder.
When we published Collateral Murder, the infamous gun camera footage of a US Apache helicopter crew eagerly blowing to pieces Iraqi journalists and their rescuers, the visual reality of modern warfare shocked the world. But we also used interest in this video to direct people to the classified policies for when the US military could deploy lethal force in Iraq.
I told you that was a tipping point. He goes on how many civilians could be and how many civilians could be killed before gaining higher approval. In fact, 40 years of his 175-year sentence was obtained by him releasing that U.S. policy. But now he moves on to his informant, Chelsea Manning, to be more specific. You see the emotion and you hear the emotion in his voice. You see the emotion in his face because he knows the damage that was caused. Where it has turned upside down, normally a journalist is forced to give up their sources, but in this case, the source was forced to give up the journalist.
But 14 years ago, the United States military arrested one of our alleged whistleblowers, Private First Class Manning, a US intelligence analyst based in Iraq. The US government concurrently launched an investigation against me and my colleagues. The US government illicitly sent planes of agents to Iceland, paid bribes to an informer to steal our legal and journalistic work product, and without formal process.
No, the U.S. government will not be happy about any of this that he's releasing. And I'm not here to deem accuracy or inaccuracy. I am covering the release of Julian Assange's first public statement. And you'll see why I make that statement in a moment, because he waffles on sides of the fence that I normally would not. He praises Barack Obama.
Ultimately, this harassment was legally groundless. President Obama's Justice Department chose not to indict me, recognizing that no crime had been committed. The United States had never before prosecuted a publisher for publishing or obtaining government information.
To do so, he goes on, would require a radical and ominous reinterpretation of the U.S. Constitution, which I agree with him. And I would agree with the decision not to indict him. In January 2017, Obama also commuted the sentence of Manning, who had been convicted of being one of his sources. You see how close he stays on that topic before he moves into, well, more explosive claims. The most explosive claim coming here.
However, in February 2017, the landscape changed dramatically. President Trump had been elected. He appointed two wolves in MAGA hats, Mike Pompeo, a Kansas congressman and former arms industry executive, as CIA director, and William Barr, a former CIA officer, as U.S. Attorney General.
He appointed two wolves in MAGA hats. Where is he directing his warning? At Trump or to help Trump? When you listen to further testimony, there's really little question. By March of 2017, WikiLeaks had exposed the CIA's infiltration of fringe political parties. He is stating that Trump appointed Mike Pompeo and William Barr, two ex-former CIA either directors or officers. It's spying on French and German leaders. It's spying on European Central Bank, European Economic Ministries, and it's standing orders to spy on French on the street as a whole. He reveals the CIA's vast production of malware, viruses, its subversion of supply chains, its subversion of antivirus software, cars, smart TVs, and iPhones, but he continues.
CIA Director Pompeo launched a campaign of retribution. It is now a matter of public record that under Pompeo's explicit direction, the CIA drew up plans to kidnap and to assassinate me within the Ecuadorian embassy in London, and authorized going after my European colleagues, subjecting us to theft, hacking attacks, and the planting of false information. My wife and my infant son were also targeted.
Bombshell, explosive claims. It's suspect, the timing, isn't it? Pompeo launches that campaign of retribution. He states the CIA drew up plans to kidnap and assassinate him, going after his wife, his son, his colleagues. I told you this is testimony unlike anything I've heard in a very long time. But he doesn't hold back.
A CIA asset was permanently assigned to track my wife, and instructions were given to obtain DNA from my 6-month-old son's nappy. This is the testimony of more than 30 current and former U.S. intelligence officials speaking to the U.S. press, which has been additionally corroborated by records seized in a prosecution brought against some of the CIA agents involved.
Assange, as always, documented. Stella Assange sitting next to him by his side, having to listen to the persecution, what the persecution of her husband involved. I was still stunned just to hear this. It's why I'm staying off camera most of this, because the information is just too important. It requires nothing but to listen in.
By December 2017, CIA Director Pompeo had got his way, and the US government issued a warrant to the UK for my extradition. The UK government kept the warrant secret from the public for 2 more years, while it, the US government, and the new president of Ecuador moved to shape the political, the legal, and the diplomatic grounds for my arrest.
Boy, sounds like a lot of storylines converging now. And then he gives validation. In Mike Pompeo's memoir, he goes on, which he read in prison, The former CIA director bragged about how he pressured the U.S. Attorney General to bring an extradition case against me in response to our publications about the CIA. Indeed, acceding to Pompeo's request, the U.S. Attorney General reopened the investigation against me. He states that Obama had closed and rearrested Manning, this time as a witness, and he was held in prison for over a year. Fined $1,000 a day in a formal attempt to coerce her into providing secret testimony against me. She ended up attempting to take her own life. We usually think of attempts to force journalists to testify against their sources, but Manning was now a source being forced to testify against a journalist.
The criminalization of news-gathering activities is a threat to investigative journalism everywhere. I was formally convicted by a foreign power for asking for, receiving, and publishing truthful information about that power while I was in Europe. The fundamental issue is simple. Journalists should not be prosecuted for doing their jobs.
Amen for that. Amen for that. How can you prosecute a journalist for doing their job? Because you don't want the information out. Journalism is not a crime, he states. It is a pillar of a free and informed society, at least a society that cares about a balance and has nothing to hide. It doesn't have an agenda. It's contrary to those or what the journalist may report on.
Freedom of expression and all that flows from it is at a dark crossroad. I fear that unless institutions like PACE wake up to the gravity of the situation, it will be too late. Let us all commit to doing our part to ensure that the light of freedom never dims, that the pursuit of truth will live on, and that the voices of the many are not silenced by the interests of the few.
That the voices of many are not silenced by the interests of a few. What does PACE decide at the end of the day? The Council of Europe's Parliamentary Assembly has voted to confirm that Julian Assange was held as a political prisoner. Testimony and warnings. Was it to Trump or about Trump? I look forward to seeing that in your comments before we kick this into a whole different level, because if you watch events that are transpiring involving Trump right now, you know the answer to the question. And why now, suddenly, is this statement released? Indicting those that Trump appointed. Man, I got a whole lot to cover on this story. If you're interested, just kick over to Restricted Republic. Love you to join me there. It's 14 days for free. We're going to go into this Jack Smith timing release is what I'm going to call it, and a whole lot of other things that happen over the last 24 hours that point you in the right direction of truth. I want you there. Go ahead and use discount code Independence. You get 14 days for free to check it out. Cancel anytime. You got a dashboard to do it all on your own. It's that easy. But now, let's continue on with this story. I love you all. Until next time, Godspeed and God bless. Justus Knight, signing out.